Big news today. Kamala Harris is going to sit down with Dana Bash tomorrow night and with Governor Walz in her first interview in 39 days. I'll come back to that with my next guest, Kevin Roberts. Kevin Roberts is the president of the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is, of course, a sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show, so I'm always careful to point that out. I've been telling you for weeks now that you need to visit the website 25truth.com. That's 25truth.com to find out the real truth about Project 2025. Let's begin there. Kevin, welcome. It's good to have you on the show. I used to go to the Heritage Foundation to broadcast every single time that I was in the Beltway. But when I moved to the Beltway and built my own studio there, I have stopped doing that. So I don't see you very often, but it's good to see you again. I last saw you down at an event when President Trump was speaking in Florida. How have you handled this controversy over Project 2025?
Well, Hugh, thanks for having me and thanks for everything you do every day. You know, we're all big fans of yours. But to your great question, by continuing to do what we always do, which is number one, to tell the truth, and number two, to remind people amid these mischaracterizations by the left that the purpose of Project 2025 is to implement policies, if the president so chooses to implement them, that will restore the American dream. And because those are threats to the radical left, they hate it and they've mischaracterized it.
Well, they have made a mantra, and I doubt they've ever even seen the first one in 1980, Mandate for Leadership, or the most recent one before Project 2025. But let's tell people first, what's in Project 2025?
Essentially the same thing, or the same category of things that have been in Mandate for Leadership since 1980. That was our first project, which then President-elect Reagan used. Even President Reagan, who called the Heritage Foundation his think tank, didn't implement all of those policies or hire all the people we recommended. We don't operate with that level of presumption, obviously. But the key part of Project 2025 is this set of policies. As you have heard me say, it's like a menu at a restaurant. In fact, it's like the menu at Cheesecake Factory, which I think is one of the most overwhelming menus on the planet, which is to say
Agree.
every single policy issue that anyone would work on, particularly those of us who are conservatives, is in there. And because we are a public policy organization and have great scholars, we don't just talk about these things. We actually lay out the detailed plans to implement ideas. For example, President Trump and we agree that the U.S. Department of Education should be eliminated. The Heritage Foundation has been calling for the elimination of that department since the day it was created in 1979. And ironically, just to hang on that point for a moment, Hugh, if I may, ironically, the millions of dollars progressive Democrats have spent mischaracterizing the project actually has caused this idea of eliminating that department to go mainstream. So, you know, we welcome the conversation that's intellectually honest and understand that obviously there will be some disagreements.
I love for people to go to 25truth, excuse me, 25truth.com and find out what's really in there. Now, I want to talk with you, Kevin Roberts, about how Project 2025 would inform your questions of Vice President Harris. Dana Bash has a big job to do. It's the first interview. I think, my view, not yours, Vice President Harris utterly lacks the skill set to be the commander-in-chief of the United States. It will be a disaster if she's elected. I also believe as a professional broadcaster, you should ask one question at a time, and they should not be trick questions. What would you hope she asks her?
You know, I love that framing. As a policy person and not as a partisan, although I'm unabashedly conservative, I agree entirely. We don't play the gotcha game at Heritage. You don't do that yourself. And I hope that that interview goes according to what you've outlined. But the most important question to ask Kamala Harris is, Vice President Harris, which policies will you enact that will restore the American dream? Give her the opportunity to answer that open-ended question focused on policies and ideas. And it would be very fair for the interviewer to ask a follow-up question regarding the vice president's seeming flip-flopping nature on a host of issues. If the vice president's decided, for example, Hugh, that she now supports the border wall, then it's very fair game, and it's not a gotcha question to ask, ma'am, what has caused you to change your position on that? Is it the reality of the damage that has been caused by the president's policies and yours? These are the kinds of issues that Americans care about. They're tired of the gotcha politics. They're tired of the mischaracterizations. Ultimately, Hugh, to sum up here, What they're looking for is a return to normal in this country. And I think all of the interviewers' questions need to be focused on that when she sits down with the vice president.
You know, Kevin Roberts, I would love if they adopted your first interview. Because my view on interviews generally is that the first questions, other than my routine three, which I ask young people, is Alger a communist spy? Have you read The Looming Tower, et cetera, et cetera? I love an open-ended question that allows someone to go wherever they want to kind of steady their nerves. That's a fair way to go about it. I am interested in commander in chief stuff primarily, Kevin, and my big three are: did Israel have the right to strike Hezbollah preemptively this past weekend? Does Israel have the right to strike Iran if it readies an attack? And should Israel destroy Karg Island if they are attacked? These are the kind of questions I want asked. What's your level of confidence that Dana will do so?
0%. No disrespect to her personally, but if you look at her career, you see a pattern of favoritism toward one side. By the way, I don't think there should be favoritism on the other side if you're presenting yourself as someone who's objective. I don't mind, obviously, people on the left or the right who are unabashedly ideologically so. But the problem with Dana, the problem with CNN generally, although there are exceptions to some people in their network, is that they present themselves as being objective. They have a huge market share, especially internationally. They dominate what international friends think about American politics. And so I'm hopeful that maybe just in a tiny way, this conversation you and I are having might encourage Dana to ask really fair questions, because if she does that, she actually can have an interview that influences the outcome of the election. The American people will decide the outcome. You and I, of course, have our own preferences, but the American people are looking for substantive conversations. That's what Dana owes it to this country, to her ethics in journalism. I'm hopeful, although not real confident that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, Kevin. I'm much more optimistic than you are. I've done 4 presidential debates, GOP primary debates with Dana, and I always thought that she was quite professional in the room and trying to be fair. And I expect this, but I also think it's a high. The person with the most on the line here is not Kamala Harris or Tim Walz. They're going to have a second and a third and a fourth chance if they screw up. This could be a Candy Crowley moment for Dana if she gets it wrong. I mean, it could destroy CNN forever if they give her softballs. Do you agree with that?
I agree entirely. And look, I hope that you're right. For the sake of the country, for Dana herself, for CNN. But you might imagine, given what the nonsense that Heritage has had to deal with over the last few months, mischaracterizations not just by leftist politicians, but by their willing accomplices in the press. I'm just not very confident. I will credit CNN, by the way, for implementing a couple of fact checks on the radical left. So perhaps there's reason for your optimism. I'll certainly be looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward. I think they did a fine job, Jake and Dana, in their first debate. But I will be objective about this. Let me ask about Project 2025 and nuclear power. President Trump was on the program last week. He's the first candidate to say, we got to go back to nuclear power. AI and supercomputing requires at least as much power total as we produce today. I was so Doug Burgum obviously got to him. Do you agree with that? And do you think America knows how much actual energy we need to advance as a superpower?
I agree with it 1,000%. And the following comment is not an endorsement, although President Trump is a friend and I admire him. People underestimate the depth of Donald Trump's knowledge about policy. And for him to key in on that point, you and I understand that because we're policy wonks. The key point being just the amount of energy that supercomputing, that these data centers all soak up. There is no way that we can achieve that if, in fact, that's what we want to continue building, while also going down this road of so-called green energy. President Trump is genius in this comment, in this interview he did with you, because he sidesteps the political controversy that pits, say, fossil fuels versus wind and solar energy. Most Americans, as you know, say, let's take an all of the above approach. Let's get rid of the subsidies that, of course, introduce artificial incentives in the market. One of the ways that you can do that evidenced by a couple of European countries of all places, is by re-embracing nuclear energy. I happen to think that that's the future. We've been talking about that at Heritage for years. In fact, my colleague Jack Spencer is writing a book about that right now. And again, not a partisan comment, certainly not an endorsement, but I applaud Donald Trump and any politician of either of the major parties who is talking about that, because that's the kind of real substance that amounts to policy solutions to the problems that Americans are facing.
Kevin, can I keep you for 3 more minutes during the break? I want to play it tomorrow, but I have a big, important question to ask you. Energy is freedom, America. If we don't have energy, we will not be free. We must produce our own energy: oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, wind, whatever, geothermal. I'll be right back.